What is up? Welcome back to the Love It Creative channel, and in today's video we're going to make this, and I'm going to go nice and slow. Normally I speed up my videos, but today we're going to spend the whole 32 minutes together and you can see and hear my drawing process. So first I'm going to start off with popping my color palette out just because I feel like that makes it easier. If you go to the top of your palettes and just go to the middle, you can see that little notch at the top of the little box. Press that and drag over. So I've got my sketch layer out and it's on top of everything, and I've set it to multiply. If you tap the little N and then tap multiply, it will stay on top without being like too distracting. I also turned the opacity down. So we're going to start with, on our first layer, getting this first big mountain out of the way. I ended up changing all of these colors, so stay tuned for that. But I want each mountain on a different layer. That will enable me to edit them in the future. Sorry, my in-laws dog is barking like crazy. I kept getting confused on which color I had used and which color I hadn't, so. And then I kept changing my mind. We're gonna do this back mountain first. And it doesn't matter if it overlaps because I'm gonna set it behind. And there we go. Now we're gonna do a couple of extra layers just because I know I'm gonna be using them. So I'm gonna do this one a little bit lighter, but I'm gonna change my mind after anyways because that's way too close in colors. It doesn't look like hardly different at all. But I'm gonna color it out and then change the color. So I am using the dry ink brush that I've resized in the property section to make it nice and big. It is one of my favorite brushes and my go-tos no matter what size it is. So I have made these layers alpha locked and then picked a different color and hit fill layer. This just makes it so I can easily fill my layer all at once rather than just having to like recolor over it. I just feel like that's the fastest way. So I think I still end up changing all of these colors again, but we are playing with the colors. I picked kind of like a bluish purple, and then I have pops of yellow. That was an accident. Forgot to do the alpha lock on that layer so that I could fill it. And then I turned the alpha lock off because we're done. I finally settled on some colors. So now I'm going to do some layers in front of it. So we're going to do this small patch of snow kind of off to the side of this trail. Color that in. Normally I color drop, and I color dropped a little bit of this, but I like that sometimes the back color seeps through. I feel like that's really fun. So that's why I've been coloring it in with the big brush that I've been using. Now we're going to do a mountain up to the side of here. Oh my gosh, the dog's barking so much. Sorry about that. So we're going to do this little foothill, and that's just to create a little bit more depth in the long run. So we've got that going for us. Now I'm going to add the color for the little trail that we have. And I'm going to make that the brightest white just because it's kind of like our subject. And I had this way too big, like 3 times in a row. So turn the size down for that. Trace it out. You'll notice that I have the farther part of the trail smaller and then what's close to us bigger. It just allows for it to tell the whole story that we're looking basically far away. And the trail gets smaller as it goes, and it goes around the bend. And I have it going over a little bit of the hill that is next to it, which I'm going to do now. We've got that hill, and I'm just going to have it run right along the side of the trail. And then I've got that little gap, so I'm just going to hop onto another layer. And, well, I do that in a second. I realize that I need to go into a different layer so I can have the difference after I've already colored it in. So we're going to make that a little bit darker just because it's going to be like it's dipping down to the side. So we're going to have it be a little bit darker there. So that's kind of the our base colors. Now we're just gonna go in and start adding details. I believe I start with the trees next, that just like line of trees along the fence line. So I'm going to pick a dark color as our base, and then we're going to add other stuff to it in the long run. So let's see, go back to my dry ink brush, turn the size up just a little bit, and I'm going to do all of these trees. This I might speed up just a little bit just so you can get the gist of it, so you're not watching me draw trees for the next 5 minutes. So here are the trees sped up. I'm basically just taking strokes and pulling them out to the side. I don't really have a set baseline in between. So they're like, they look a little hand-drawn, and I realized I didn't want to draw all of them. So basically I duplicated it, moved them over, and then I just flipped them horizontally so they weren't like an exact copy of the other trees. And I ended up making them all a little bit stronger, or I don't know why my video is doing this. I don't have it sped up at all, so I'm sorry that it's skipping around a little bit. So it must just be because the video is a little bit longer. And then I'm going to add a couple of trees in. There we go. Now we're back to normal speed. Sorry about that hiccup. So, and then I decided I wanted to make it a little bit smaller anyways and have it not go over so far. So I just used the transform tool, which is up in the cursor, added a couple more trees to the look, and then ended up taking some of the trees out, adding in some others that were kind of just stray off to the side. I loved how this turned out. I usually don't like my trees that I do, so it turned out pretty good. And now I'm going to do the fence, and I'm going to do it this gold color. I just feel like these pops of gold were so fun. And I wasn't so set on it being perfect because it's kind of like a barbed wire fence where it's not absolutely perfect, and then it's going to have little tiny gold lines going across it. The first one I'm going to make perfectly straight, and then the other ones just kind of come along the way as they come to make them look a little bit more hand-drawn, not so perfect, because that's kind of what we're going for with this style today. I'm also going to do the little rails for the side of the path, and those get smaller as we go as well. I didn't make them quite small enough as we went, so I had to make the pegs a little bit smaller. And this one I'm not going to do a line on just because I feel like they looked good without it, so we're going to leave that how it is, even though I'm going to try right now to do it, and then I realized, nope, not a fan of that, not going to do it. So now we've got more of our details laid in. Now I'm going to start adding some textures. So I'm going to do an overlay, and then I'm going to do a dark gray for the color, and that will just make it so it stays the same hue of blue, but still gives us a shadow. And first I did it way too light. I was like, nope, that's not what we want. So I'm making it seem like the snow is bumpy, and there's shadows being cast behind the little bumps of snow. So I'm going to draw out the little lines just kind of randomly. I did it basically until I liked it. And I know I'm not following the lines I had on my sketch, but that's just because I wanted to draw those so I would remember to do it. And now I'm going to have a darker shadow. It's not that much darker than the dark gray that I picked. And so we're going to get these shadows going, just kind of off in that direction. I could have made these solid, but I wanted a little bit more texture, make it look a little bit more different. So there's that. Just kind of sketched it out until I liked how it looked. Added another one because I felt like it needed it. And I ended up liking how that looked. I wasn't crazy about it because I do like things to look a little bit more hyper realistic, or I expect myself to draw more hyper realistic, and then this is what we come up with. So I judge myself a little too harshly. So now we're going to do, I'm not quite sure. Oh, so I wanted to do the shadows for the trees, and then I realized I could just duplicate my trees. So I draw a couple of things, and then I'm like, nope, we're going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to do the transform tool, flip it, and then twist it, and have it match the bottom. And then because the shadows wouldn't be cast like perfectly straight back, I'm going to, well, first change the color to a little bit darker, change the opacity. And now I'm going to use the transform tool to do, and I'm going to use distort and just pull it off to the side so they look a little bit longer. And then I'm going to move it just a little bit so they match up. And I really liked how this turned out too. I thought, I feel like it looks a little bit more realistic. I just messed a couple of times with finding the perfect shadow. And I really like how that turned out. Now we are going to get ready to add some snow to the trees, which I'm excited about. And I'm going to do this all with clipping masks just so I don't have to worry about keeping my strokes super controlled, just because I'm going to add a lot of strokes. So I'm going to add a new layer on top of the trees, make it a clipping mask, and then I'm going to continue to use that dry ink. I'm just going to make the size a little bit bigger for that snow. And I'm going to add, so I want it to seem like they're casted in a shadow. So I'm not going to do white. I'm going to do like a light blue, but not the same light blue as the mountain behind it, because that would be dumb. So I'm going to get a light grayish, bluish type color. And I'm going to add strokes on all of the trees. I realized that my opacity was down, and I don't want that either. So I'm going to add those. And I see my opacity is still down. I don't know why I just kept going. I know I had to redo it. All right, opacity up. There we go. All right, so we're going to just add it in layers, just to make it seem like the trees got some snow on it. And I'm going to speed this up because this does take a long time. So this is basically our snow that's in the shadow. And so I'm just adding it in layers so you can still see some of the tree, and basically just making it on all of the trees. So here we are. And I had to undo some of the stuff just because it got a little confusing when the trees were really close together. So there is that layer of the trees. Now we're going to go and I'm going to add another clipping mask, and I'm going to pick an even lighter color and make it still a little bluish tint. And just on the edges, I'm going to do snow. So it's like basically the moon is peeking off to the sides. And I feel like this just adds some visual interest, but we're going to speed this up too because y'all don't need me to paint these trees for forever. So there is that layer, making it nice and snowy. And that's going to basically do it for these trees. After this, we're going to add some trees to the ridge line up on the big hill behind these trees. So last couple of strokes. I think I went a little too crazy with the snow on some parts, but I actually really like how it turned out. So you should know that I basically went into this with no plan. I was just making it up as we went along. And I do my voice recordings afterwards, so you get this wonderful commentary. So I felt like we needed some trees on this ridgeline in the back. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to... Oh, just kidding. We're not going to add trees to the ridgeline next. I'm just going to add a little bit of texture to the shadows. I just wanted to add something else. So that's what we did. And I should have probably sped this up, but we did not. So I used a dry ink brush to texture it. At least I think it was dry ink. I hope it was dry ink. With just a lighter color, just to make it so it wasn't as stark of a shadow that was being cast. So we got that going for us. Then we're going to add stuff to the ridgeline. So there's our shadows. And I just used the Alpha Lock to do that so it wouldn't like color on everything else. I just did it for the tree shadows. Now we're going to we're going to get our moon. So wow, I really jumped ahead with talking about doing trees on the ridgeline. So thought that was next. That's all right. So we've got our moon. If you do your long press to get a perfect shape and then tap with another circle or another finger, it will do a perfect circle. So I use that tool a lot. I think I end up adding a little bit of texture to this moon if I remember right, but probably not. Now we're going to add some stuff to the ridgeline. So I'm going to go on top of that mountain and get I think I was like, I don't know what color to do. So we're going to do a dark purple. And I'm basically going to just add little triangles and then little like fluffy trees. And I recognize that in the winter time, these fluffy trees would be dead, but just don't mind that, okay? Just pretend like it's summertime up there. So we got all these little triangle trees, and we're going to do something similar. We're not going to add a layer of snow on them just because they're so far away. They'd be just, you know, shadowed in the background. So I'm just going to add a little bit of light coming off the side of them. So I'm going to do a clipping mask, and then I'm going to do an overlay layer. That way I don't have to search for a color and just do a light gray or basically white. And then I realized I didn't like how that looked. So we're not going to do overlay. We're just going to do normal, and I'm going to look for a color anyways. So it's going to be a light purple. And I like that it was a lot less saturated. So that's sometimes a problem I run in with the overlay layer is sometimes it's a little too saturated for my taste. I also started putting the shadows on the wrong side. So I had to switch it. But basically I'm just doing it all on one edge, and I'm not being worried about it being perfect. It was just, yeah. And I realize now that it's probably still on the wrong side. Do some shadows to create some visual interest. Hopefully you're not judging me for the fact that I had it on the right side and then I put it on the wrong side. Okay. Next, I'm going to add some texture to all of the hills. So I'm using, basically what I did is I went into a long time ago, I went to the drying ink brush after I duplicated it. I went to the grain source. I went into the import or edit, and instead of changing the texture, I just tapped it with 2 fingers to invert it. So it would just come up as a texture rather than like how dry ink is, where it's just got little gaps in it. So I did that to add some texture or make a texture brush. If you want to learn more about texture, I have a texture 101 video, and I'm pretty sure I talk about that specific brush in that video. So you can go check that out. It's on the channel. It's called Texture 101. It's got a little plant and a lamp and stuff on the cover photo. So I'm just adding textures to the other mountain hill things. Now we're going to add some little lines to the snow and little footprints, because who doesn't want to see a little man hiking through here? So cute. So I added basically snowshoe footprints, and I was like, well, now I have to draw a guy. I guess I could have just put could have just put prints all the way around and made it seem like someone was there, but instead we drew a little person, and I wasn't worried about them being perfect because it was so tiny and so far away. So I basically just popped some legs on there, and then I drew a body, and then I drew some sticks with it and a head. I tried to draw like a beanie. It looks more like a French cop, but we're going for it. Got some trekking poles. I did end up adding some color to this too. I gave him, I think, yellow shoes and yellow poles just to help tie it into the whole ambiance. Oh, leaning in. Got some forehead shots. So, we got yellow sticks. And then I'm going to go ahead and just draw yellow snowshoes. But I'll color back in the legs in a second, just because I was like, I'm not doing another layer underneath this. So then I just color grabbed the guy's body color and then just recolored it in. And I left a little bit of that gray underneath the yellow because I figured it was just a shadow. So that kind of worked itself out perfectly. And then that's basically our little guy. I added a little purple, and I was like, wow, that actually looks kind of good. I'm pretty impressed with myself. Good job, Sam. And then I realized I needed to add some texture to some of the other layers, and to this one especially because I just felt like it needed a little bit of texture on the snow. So I just added some lines. Hopefully you can see those. They're not super dramatic. So now we are going to add texture to the other mountains, I believe. We're still just working on this snow road. Got that going for us. Adding some more texture to that. Using that same brush, I add a little extra texture around the edge of the basically like the side rail, and I guess I could have added some shadows for them, but I just added a little extra texture around it. So now I'm going to add texture to the other mountains, and we're going to speed this up because holy cow, I do a lot of shading. So what I do is I add that texture to the ridge line, basically like the highlight coming off over the mountain, and then I just add make the bottoms darker with that texture. And I end up doing that to the other mountains because I didn't do that on the first two when I started the texture process. So I add dark there and then a little bit of a light highlight on the edge. And I love how this turned out. I'm getting so impressed with myself because a year ago I could not have done this stuff. I would have just given up on it. So the fact that it has turned out so you can actually tell what's going on, I'm pretty impressed. So just take that as a note too. You will figure this out and it will totally get easier, and you'll become proud of yourself basically. So I'm going to add basically just a texture here just to make it seem like there's a shadow. I didn't want to draw out a specific shadow, although I probably should have off to the side of it now that I think about it, but that's okay. I like how it looked with just adding the texture. Or maybe I do add a shadow. Maybe, anyways, it's been 22 minutes, so I'm grateful if you're still here. I'm trying to make it work here on YouTube, and so I'm grateful for you watching. I should have said that for you earlier. I was not getting this. Finally, I figured out the shadow direction it needed to be. So I do add a shadow. Good job, Sam. Adding shadows when you knew you should have. So we've got the shadows, and I need to add a little shadow to the little dude. I think I do the moon next though. So I first thought, I was like, oh, I'll just put some like little lines around it. Oh, I do the sky first. Just kidding. No, do I do it? Okay, I'm so sorry. I should have organized this better. So I do some lines around it, like making it glowy. And then I realized I hated how it looked. So what I ended up doing, you'll see it in just a second. I duplicate my my moon layer, and then I lower the opacity a ton, like way down. And then I just increase the size, and then I just have it hang out, and I'm like, well, I feel like it needs just one more. I think it could have done with just that one, but instead I made another layer, decreased the opacity of that, and then I realized those were a little too dark, so I ended up lowering the opacity again after I erased this part of the circle just so it's not covering over the mountain layers. And so we're going to change the opacity just a little bit more, just so it's a faint little glowy circle. And we're coming into the last 2.5 or so minutes. I'm going to add a texture to the sky. I'm using Larapuna, and I'm just using a couple of different colors of purple. There we go. Larapuna. Got it. Okay. So make that a little bit bigger, and I basically just wanted to add some sort of texture to the sky because I felt like it needed it. It's a purple sky. It can have whatever texture it wants. So I just I love the texture of this brush, so kind of just let that, make it seem like there's some wispy clouds in the sky or something going on, some wind blowing, who knows. Let your imagination run wild. So I just kind of played with using a darker brush with a lighter brush, and I was like, oh, that's it. And then I was like, no, I need to add some more shadows and some more highlights and stuff to these areas. So we're going to use that same dry texture brush to add just a little bit more of a casted shadow on some of these hills. I'm going to add it on this field right here just to add a little bit more something something, but I took a second to get it just right. Added that same texture to that far corner just so we can get like a little shadow going on. And then last but not least, I brought this up like 4 times. I got to add a shadow for this little guy back behind him. So I just used that same texture brush, made it nice and small, and that was the last piece. I was like, does it need anything else? I don't know. But that's it. So thank you for staying tuned, and I hope you like and subscribe if this video was at all helpful for you. I'm so grateful for you guys being here, and if you watch the whole thing, you get all the brownie points. Leave it in the comments and I'll shout you out like, oh, good job, that person watched the whole video. Anyways, like, subscribe, and share if this was helpful for you. Thanks for watching and staying tuned to my channel.